ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن عبده ورسوله محمدا قد بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد في الأولين وصل اللهم وسلم عليه في الآخرين. اللهم صل وسلم عليه في الملأ الأعلى إلى يوم الدين واجمعنا معه ومع الأنبياء والصديقين في جنات النعيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So we express our praise and our gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that is equal to His blessings and parallel to His bounties. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and last, and we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a manner that is befitting of Him. And we bear witness that there is nothing to be worshipped besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala along with our partners. And we bear witness that His servant and His messenger and His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have delivered the message and conveyed the trust and have advised the ummah well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to send His prayers and blessings and peace upon our beloved and example our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam for eternity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we all believe, have sent the Qur'an for us as a huda, as a book of guidance, so we can follow Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we can please Him subhanahu wa ta'ala and stay away from the things that He have prohibited us from doing. But I wanted to speak on the history of the Qur'an, and that topic might sound a little kind of awful, weird. Like, what kind of history? We just know the Qur'an was revealed over 23 years and it's over. But inshallah, I wanted to take us through a journey with the Qur'an. And that journey will span from the first moment of revelation and throughout the life of the Prophet ﷺ, throughout those 23 years. We want to talk about how did the revelation come about? What was the manner that it came through? What did the Prophet ﷺ experience? What did the Prophet ﷺ hear and see? What did the companions experience? And all of that. So we want to take that experience inshallah with the Qur'an. And before we start, as Brother Hussein mentioned my name, Mohamed. I mean, the name is so good, you have to use it twice, right? It's just not enough once. But no, my name is Mohamed. My father is Abdul Hafid and his father, my grandfather is Mohammed. And a few, of course, in the lineage is Mohammed or Mohammed. So it just so happened that my first name and my last name, which was my great-grandfather's name, was Muhammad. And one of the grandfathers in the middle of Muhammad, so I have like 3 Muhammads in the name, alhamdulillah. So yeah, so it's just kind of a coincidence because we use lineages where I come from. I'm from Sudan originally, but I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. And you know, for us and for Arab countries, we use the lineage, Muhammad, son of. So it just so happened that to be the 4th one and the 5th one to be Muhammad as well, alhamdulillah. The title, of course, Qari is that of a reciter of the Qur'an. So alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me to have been able to study the Qur'an, especially the recitation of it, and have an ijazah in the teaching of the Qur'an and the qira'ah of Hafs. And I'm in the process of learning other qira'at as well. And also I'm studying a course of ifta to give fatwa in the Hanafi madhab right now, one of the shuyukh locally, alhamdulillah. So, history of the Qur'an. Why are we even talking about the history of the Qur'an? Somebody might ask the question and say, you know what? We already believe in the Qur'an. So why do we care about the history of it? Why not just go straight into the recitation and then perhaps the meanings and move forward? Right? Why look back and dig into the history? So before I state my reasons of speaking about this topic, I would like to hear from you. So why do you think that this topic would actually even be important? Go outside.
Because because it was actually revealed by revelation.
If you don't, say it again.
It was revealed by revelation.
Okay. Yes.
Because today is very important that when we go and talk to the people from other faith, they present their books. At the same time, they present their history. So, because they have no way to believe something was a revelation from Allah or something, but they have some information, some documentation. So they try to maintain the history to tell us about that.
So we need, as believers in the Quran, we need to have that history, that background in order for us when we discuss it with the rest of society, that we have that background to solidify our iman and to also express it to others. Okay, very good. Any other reasons?
For the love of Quran.
For the love of Quran, very beautiful, right? If you love someone, You want to know everything about that someone, right? So that's a beautiful reason, right? You have the love for the book of Allah, you have love for the words of Allah, you want to know everything about it, right? Yes, you want to know how to recite it. It's mandatory. Every single person have to know how to recite the Quran properly, right? So we have to learn that. We have to learn its meaning, but also we want to learn more about it. The Quran has secrets. And if you, just like for example, me and Brother Hussein, we don't speak that often. We need to hang out together, brother. So we don't hang out that often. So the brother is not going to feel comfortable enough to give me his secrets, right? You don't know me enough. You don't know my secrets, I don't know your secrets, because we don't speak that often. From time to time, we see each other, oh, brother, we hug and all that. We have love for each other, but we don't communicate enough in order for us to know each other's secrets or to confide in each other. The Quran is the exact same way. If you build the strong relationship with the Quran and you read the Quran often, the Quran will open the doors for his secrets for you, inshallah. Yes.
Also, studying the history of the Qur'an answers a lot of the shubuhat or the suspicions, because a lot of people from other faiths, they cannot imagine how something that was not written when it was first revealed can be preserved the way it was initially revealed until today. So it answers a lot of shubuhat, a lot of suspicions.
Very good. Jazakumullah khair. So just to repeat it aloud for everyone. So it answers a lot of the shubuhat, a lot of the suspicions or the attacks, whether from within the Muslim community or outside the Muslim community, about a lot of issues, as you will see inshallah, that have to do with, as the brother expressed right now, the writing and the compilation of the Quran, which we will discuss. So not only how it was revealed, but how it was compiled, how was it put together in a book form, and how did it get to the book that we have now, the Medina printed, for example, one and all those printed Quran. How did it get to that stage, right? So we'll answer and we'll move away all those doubts that we would have ourselves, and we'll answer all those questions that non-Muslims will have about the revelation and the compilation of the Quran. Beautiful.
I was just going to say the same thing, but in a different way. It helps in doing da'wah to the non-Muslims.
Giving da'wah to non-Muslims, yes. Very good. So alhamdulillah, there are a lot of reasons. We can probably expound for the next 10-15 minutes about that, right? There are so many benefits to learning the history of the Quran, right? Learning the history of our Sharia and how it actually was compiled, the fiqh and hadith and all of that. It answers and puts away a lot of doubt that we would have. A lot of weakness that we have in our iman will be answered by studying this history of the Quran and the history of our deen. Right? So we strengthen the iman, we strengthen the relationship with the Quran, and thereby the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So with that, inshallah, let's begin. So the very beginning of the revelation of the Quran, as we all know, started at this place right here. Right? You guys are familiar with that image? Yes? Ghar Hira. Very good. So the Ghar, or the cave, the small cave, it's not really literally cave, they translate it as cave. But Ghar is different than Kahf. Kahf is a cave. Ghar is like kind of literally means an indent. It's just a little opening that go inside of a mountain or a rock, right? And you will see that in this image right here. This is the actual opening where the man is coming out from outside. This is the opening to the Ghar for those who have not been there yet. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to visit Mecca inshallah and see that place inshallah. Say amen.
Amen.
So you see that it's little. The man have to he's not a tall man. He's probably shorter than me. I'm 6'3". He looks shorter, like 5 something, right? And he still have to kind of hunch over, and you probably have to maneuver. I had other pictures, but I kind of lost it in transfer from the files. But it's something small. Like a person my size will have some serious difficulty trying to get in there, right? It's difficult. So, and I want you throughout this talk to live these moments, right? When we talk about the history, we do Islam and Qur'an and Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ a disservice when we read the history just for the account. This happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. We just memorize it as just sequence. No, live the moments with the Prophet ﷺ. Imagine if you're able to visit this place or just even looking at the pictures. And you're reading the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ when he would go in this cave and stay for days and weeks. Imagine the tightness and the remoteness of this cave. And how the Prophet ﷺ filled the darkness of night, pitch black, by himself ﷺ. What did he feel? What did he see? This is the image now looking the opposite way. From the Ghar, from the mouth of that cave, looking toward Mecca. So you see, of course, right here, the big clock tower and all of that, and the Haram is right under here. So the Prophet ﷺ is looking at the Haram, at Mecca and the people of Mecca as he's here sitting contemplating and thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other side of the cave just looks at mountain, is open on both sides. And it looks at the other side, just an area of the desert where it's full of mountains. So imagine the Prophet ﷺ is taking in this scenery and thinking about the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then looking back at Mecca and looking at how lost people are and the craziness that they were living in, right? From worshipping idols that were just scattered around Mecca, and especially around the Kaaba. And then just the way that people react and act around the Kaaba and as far as their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with each other is just, it was a dog-eat-dog environment, right? It was total jahiliyyah, total ignorance. And the Prophet ﷺ is thinking about all of this, thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when you look at these images, imagine that. Put yourself in that scenario. How did the Prophet ﷺ feel? How would I feel if I'm there? Without all this Hajjaj, all these people who are paying Hajj and doing Hajj and Umrah, if nobody was there, I'm by myself, and I feel alone in society. Imagine if we are in this society, but imagine if you're the only Muslim here. Imagine that. In the entire city of Torrance, you are the only Muslim. You and perhaps your wife and children. That's it. Imagine how would you feel? Right? And especially if you feel that, you know what, I don't have complete guidance. I know this is wrong, but I don't know how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly. I don't know how to build a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly. And then we imagine that story that we often hear, and we perhaps learn as little kids, of Jibreel alayhi salam coming to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Did we think about the details of that incident? We have to remember again, it was darkness, it was night. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in Naghar thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thinking about how do I follow the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then he sees a silhouette coming toward him. He can't really tell, it's dark. It's not like he can just turn a flashlight like who's here, right? It's not like you have a match, they can light, candle, nothing, right? You just have to just try to figure out what's going on. This big silhouette of a person comes towards him. Iqra. We all know the history or the story. But try to envision that. Try to kind of have a mental image. It's okay to do that. And imagine the Prophet ﷺ being afraid at the moment. Nobody ever came to him in that ghar. And all of a sudden somebody come mandating, Iqra. Right? With a commanding voice. And of course the Prophet ﷺ said, Ma ana biqari. And imagine that big silhouette of a person give you that bear hug. To the point the Prophet ﷺ said, my ribs, it felt like they were like, that's it, they were touching. My ribs were about to crack. And the Prophet ﷺ was very strong physically. Right? Now, mashallah, we are very soft in this life that we live, lifestyle that we live, right? Any little poke, you know what I'm saying? I'm suffering now for a few days from a little nick, right? Or just you go and exercise for a little bit, I'm sore for the next week and so on, right? Even as young guys, we still feel that. The Prophet ﷺ was physically fit. He's walking up that mountain without those stairs that we have now. How many of you, by the way, by show of hands, how many of you have been to Hajj? Show of hands. MashaAllah. How many out of you, how many actually went to Ghar Hira? MashaAllah. Very nice. 6 of you. Was it easy or difficult? Huh? Very hard, right?
I went to the halfway.
Halfway, that's it. Like that's it. I'm done. I can see it. It's right there.
They have stairs or
Okay, so yes, there are steps, right? There are steps. Kind of. It's not exactly like nice steps,
It's not nice.
but those are. It's been around for hundreds of years. So some of them are high, some of them are low, some of them kind of wiped out, some of them are bent, some of this, which makes it more difficult, right? But it's going on and on and on. You keep going, you're like, man, I didn't expect it to be that far, right? So imagine the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without stairs. He had to climb a mountain, right? And he will go and stay there for weeks, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, at a time. And all of a sudden, a person shows up. He doesn't know who that is.
With his food and water too, like he would take some.
Yeah, he won't have
nourishment.
enough. He will take very little nourishment to the point where his wife will be worried. Is he dead? What happened? I haven't heard nothing. His uncle Abu Talib. People who were concerned. And then he will come back, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, had been fasting for days and weeks. And enough provision barely to kind of keep him alive, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in the midst of that, we have Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him and squeezing him to that extent. The Prophet ﷺ has no idea what's going on. Right? But this was the beginning of the revelation. So now, revelation, the wahi, comes in different ways to all prophets. Right? So we'll talk about these ways inshallah. One way, and it's the very beginning for all prophets, is the ru'ya sadiqa, true visions or true dreams. So there's a hadith, for example, where Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardaha said that in the very beginning, before Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, for a few weeks and months preceding that, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to have visions and dreams in his sleep, and the next, within hours or a day or two, it will come exactly as he saw it sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The description she used, كَفَلَقُ الصُّبْحِ, right? As certain or as clear as the dawn. When the sun comes up, you know how it comes and you're able to see the disk of the sun in the very beginning of it when it rises, and it's clear, you see it. It's just that clear. It comes exactly as he saw it sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So we see also in the Qur'an or all the Anbiya, the prophets of Allah, when they see dreams, and it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the way, those visions, where any person is able to see these if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables them to. Right? So this is the beginning or the signs that there is some prophet will come in, but it's not only for prophets. So people can actually have dreams. Even non-believers can have that. We have that in the Qur'an. Fir'aun saw a dream, and it was interpreted by who? Who remembers the story? About some cows and some all of that? Remember the story?
Yusuf
alayhi salam. Very good. Jazakumullah khair. Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted that dream and it came true. Right? 7 years of bliss followed by 7 years of drought and difficulty. So anyone can have those dreams. But the dreams of the prophets are a little different. Right? They come directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's wahi. That is a message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that have to be taken verbatim. Whereas our visions and our dreams, we're not sure. Sometimes we're like, okay, it seems so vivid, it seems like it's something good, I'm not sure. So we have some doubts concerning that. The other way is direct from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mubashara min wara'i hijab, of course, from behind a veil. Because no one can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly and all of that. So it happened to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When did it happen? Anybody know?
Mi'raj.
The Mi'raj, very good. Isra and Mi'raj, the night journey when the Prophet ﷺ was taken from Mecca to Jerusalem to Al-Quds and up the 7 skies. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to him directly, and the Prophet ﷺ said that hijabun min nur. There was a veil of light. Well, Allah heard the voice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanding that we pray our salawat. Musa alayhi salam also talked to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's direct revelation, direct from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a prophet or to a messenger without any intermediary. No angels whatsoever, nothing in between. So that's also another way of revelation. A different thing is an-nafth fi al-raw', right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put an inspiration in their mind or in their heart. Right? For example, there's a hadith Qudsi, or the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would say, "Nufitha fi ru'i," that it has been put into my heart that this, that, and the other. So this is another way of revelation that the Prophet ﷺ and other prophets used to receive. Another kind of wahy, another kind of revelation is the most common, through an angel, through a malak. Right? And that even comes in different kinds of ways. Sometimes that angel will come in their true image, in their real image. So in the very beginning when Jibreel ﷺ came to the Prophet ﷺ, he did not come in his true image. He just saw a silhouette of a person who was great in size. Right? And he squeezed him and told him, "Iqra," and that's it. But he wasn't able to see who that is. But when he was running down, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, according to narrations, when he was being called, "Ya Muhammad, Ya Muhammad," and the Prophet ﷺ said, I looked up and I saw Jibreel alayhi salam ala hay'atih, on his true fashion, or true actual body. And he was sitting somewhere kind of in elevation, kind of, literally he said, "Bain as-sama'i wal-ard," between the earth and the sky, meaning that he was floating, alayhi salam. And then he was covering the entire horizon from east to west. Like no matter where I look, he's just everywhere. He's huge. وَكَانَ لَهُ 600 جَنَاحٍ, and he actually has 600 wings. Now I know when we say wings, we envision like wings of birds. It doesn't have to be something like that. It's a wing. How is a wing? We don't know. Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam know best. But this is the description that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was given, and you've seen him twice in that image. Another way that angels used to come to the Prophet ﷺ is that he will hear a loud ringing of bells. This is the description of the Prophet ﷺ when he was asked by some of the companions, and we'll go inshallah in the details. Now, when you receive revelation, what happens, and one of the descriptions that he gave is that kasol salat al-jaras. It's like when you have one of those big bells and you just ring it, bong, 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 bong. It's really loud. Another way of revelation is that in human form. So just like when Jibreel alayhi salam came to the Prophet ﷺ in the very beginning, but also at other times, when, for example, the very famous hadith, where a man who came all of the sudden out of nowhere into the masjid, and the companions like Umar al-Khattab was the narrator of the hadith, says that his clothes was super white, it's not dusty, his hair was jet black, so he's not traveling, he's not dusty, but he's not from here. And people will look at him like, who is this? Right? That very famous hadith where Jibreel alayhi salam coming in that form of a man who was a stranger to them, and he asked the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Mal Islam, Mal Iman, Mal Ihsan, and so on. What is Islam? What is Iman? What is Ihsan? And every time the Prophet sallallahu will give those answers, says, Sadaqt, you told the truth. When he leaves, the Prophet sallallahu asks, do you know who this is? They said, we don't know. Hada Jibreel. This is Jibreel. He came to teach you your religion. Right? Other times, Jibreel alayhi salam will come in looking like a man that they know. Right? Which is the most famous person that the Jibreel alayhi salam used to come looking like, is a companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was a Bedouin, and he was very, very handsome. He was known for his handsomeness, radiallahu anhu wa ardah. And for example, one famous incident is in the Ghazwa of al-Ahzab, the battle of the trenches where they had to dig a trench around Medina. When the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to his house and he took off the clothes of war, this armor that he had on sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his house and he said, "You are putting down your war clothes." And he said, "Yes." He said, "But we angels have not put it down yet. There is some business to take care of. There is some treachery that we have to deal with." So the Prophet ﷺ puts on his armor and they go up. And Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardaha was coming in as that man was leaving. But when she saw him, she noticed that that's him, but it's not him. And she said to the Prophet ﷺ, "Was that Jibreel?" And he said, "Yes." She said, "I'm starting to recognize him when it's not that man." Now really quick, who is that companion of the Prophet ﷺ who Jibreel used to come looking like him most of the time?
Duhya.
Dihiyat al-Kalbi. Very good, mashallah. You guys should come over here, give the talk. Very good. Dihiyat al-Kalbi. Very handsome Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? But he's not the only man. But that's the more often than not, he will come looking like Dihya. So those are the different ways where the Prophet ﷺ used to get these revelations from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now before we continue, let's define the Qur'an. So the Qur'an, as defined by our scholars, is Kalamullah al-Mu'jiz, the miraculous words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-Munazzal ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that have been revealed to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, biwasitati Jibreel alayhi salam, through the angel Jibreel alayhi salam, al-manqulu bil-tawatur, that have been related to us and transmitted to us in abundance, meaning there are so many transmitters and so many people who have told others about it. Al-maktubu fil masahif, that we have written down in the mushaf or in a copy of the Qur'an. Al-muta'abbadu bi tilawatih, this should be a ta' not a nun. Al-muta'abbadu bi tilawatih, the one which we recite as an act of worship. It's really important to have that definition of the Qur'an, because when we understand it, look at this. Kalamullah al-Mu'jiz is the miraculous words of Allah. We have words that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that does not contain miracles like the Qur'an. So those are excluded. Right? For example, there's a hadith Qudsiyya. There's a hadith Qudsi where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling us about this, but it's not from the Qur'an. So those are out. Al-Munazzal ala Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, so we're not taking any revelation that came to any other prophet or any other human being. Have to be to Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Biwasitati Jibreel. You have to be through Jibreel alayhi salam and not any other angels. Other angels used to speak to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam from time to time. And they spoken to him. And they've even given him revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sometimes. But it's not included in the Qur'an. Al-Manqul bil-Tawatur, that it has been transmitted through the ages with an abundance of people. Right? We have, mashallah, Qurra, we have learned this from our shuyukh, and so many of them have learned for so many all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? So anything that is not related to us in that abundance is not included. We also have written it in the Mus'haf. We're talking about the Mus'haf of the Sahaba that we have written down, and we'll go into the details inshallah, that we use for worship. Any other words that we do not use for worship is not included in the Qur'an. So this is a wholesome definition of the Qur'an that we have to keep in mind. Now, when we come to the physical manifestation of wahi, how did the wahi come about? We talked about different ways of how it would come, but now what did the Prophet ﷺ experience? What did the Sahaba experience? When Jibreel alayhi salam come down, and this is important, one of the reasons, like earlier we didn't talk about it, but the reasons why we want to study this history. Now when you go and read this Qur'an, when you read ayat that you've been reading so often, that you're not even thinking about the meaning anymore. You feel no connection to it anymore. Now the next time you read it, I want you to think that, how did the Prophet ﷺ receive these ayat? How did he feel ﷺ? Did the Sahaba see Jibreel? What was the experience like? Why did it come down? Was there an issue? Was there a question? Many times, for example, an ayah will be revealed that will start يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ. They will ask you about this, right? Or يَسْتَفْتُونَكَ فِي الْكَلَالَةِ. They'll ask you to give them some fatwa about the kalala and so on. There are issues, there are questions that the Sahaba used to have, and the answer used to come directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just think of how profound that is. Now when we have questions, we ask people who have faults. We have scholars who make mistakes, right? Some scholars have very little mistakes, some scholars make mistakes left and right. It's human. But imagine having questions answered directly by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine living in those times. Now, when we read the Qur'an, we have to live the Qur'an at that moment. That when I'm reciting some ayat, no matter how often I recite it, imagine if it was being revealed in front of me right now. Imagine if I just learned it from the Prophet ﷺ and I'm reciting it. This is the kind of feeling that we want to have with the Qur'an. So one of the ways of the physical manifestations of wahi, when Jibreel alayhi salam used to come to the Prophet ﷺ with ayat of the Qur'an, the Sahaba will actually hear the buzzing of bees. And this was a description was given by many companions like Umar radiallahu anhu arda. Right? One of the other companions was not around the Prophet ﷺ that often. And not every companion, when we talk about Abu Bakr, Umar, Ali, Uthman, those Sahaba, and other famous companions of the Prophet ﷺ, may Allah be pleased with all of them, we probably think that Umar is around the Prophet ﷺ all the time. Probably perhaps the only time he's not around him when they go to sleep, which is not really accurate. Umar, for example, Khattab radiallahu anhu said that I had a deal with a friend of mine, my neighbor, Abdullah al-Ansari, where one day I will work in the fields and he goes to Medina and listen to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when he comes back home, he tells me what he learned. The next day he works in the field and I go inside of Medina and learn from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I relate to him what I've learned. So they were not around him all the time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So some companions never had that experience of actually seeing revelation come to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they used to ask the other companions who were around him more often or been around longer, how does the Qur'an come to him sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And one of the descriptions that Umar radiallahu anhu gave to some of those who asked him, that كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ دَوِيًّا كَدَوِيِّ النَّحْلِ, that we used to hear this buzzing that sounded like the buzzing of a beehive, right? Around, the closer they get to the face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam during the time of revelation, the louder it sounds. It's almost as if it's emanating from the face of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The further away you go from it, there's no sound, right? So this is something, subhanAllah, amazing. And actually, before we move on from this, this experience is from two different perspectives. The Prophet ﷺ will hear the ringing of bells like we mentioned earlier, whereas the companions, for them, they don't hear it as loud. For them it sounds like the buzzing of bees, right? So this is two different perspectives that we're getting. The Prophet ﷺ hears the bells and it's really loud and it's really difficult for him ﷺ, as we will discuss, and the companions will hear this buzzing of bees during the same time. Another thing is that the Prophet ﷺ's forehead will start to sweat, and sweat profusely, right? So, for example, one of the descriptions is that of our mother Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardaha, when she said that when the Prophet ﷺ received the revelation, even when the coldest of winter, in the coldest time of winter, he will still have beads of sweat, kal juman, And the juman is like the drops of silver that they used to put it, like a big droplets of silver, where they used to kind of use it to kind of, before they fashion it into jewelry. So she said it would be like those big drops of silver. So it's not like, you know how sometimes when you sweat because it's a little hot and you just get like glistening, you look like a seal almost, right? No, not that kind of sweating. We talk that the most sweating that we've ever had when you're just dripping. I don't know how many of you have that, but I sweat a lot. Sometimes I just drip. It feels like somebody just poured some water on you. We're talking about that kind of dripping. Even in the coldest of winters, subhanAllah. I will talk about why in a second. That he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will become very heavy. Physically, he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will become very heavy. So there's a sahabi who said that I was sitting with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was very close to his companions. Right? They were very touchy-feely. Right? They will hug often and be close to each other often. So when he was sitting, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, like most of you are sitting, kind of cross-legged, but the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam knee was on top of the thigh of the sahabi, or the companion. And they're sitting there. And all of a sudden, Jibreel alayhi salam comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the sahabi recognized the signs, of, like the ones we talk about and others that we've seen. But one thing he said that immediately, I felt his knee on my thigh was so heavy that I was afraid that my knee will break or that I will not be able to feel it anymore. Right? It started to get numb and it started to feel like, oh, I can't handle this, I can't bear this. Right? Not only that, but when the Prophet ﷺ received revelation on like riding an animal, like when he's on a camel, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and Jibreel alayhi salam comes to him, the camels at the time will not be able to hold him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So I don't know how experienced you guys are with camels, but camels, when you put too much on their back, or somebody heavy like me get on their back, they don't like it. And how do they act? They have long necks, and they will try to either bite you off their back or at least knock whatever is on their back. So they'll start to do this with their necks. So of course, he will not hit the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he will start flipping his neck, and he will immediately go down on his knees because he can't really stand. His leg will be wobbly, and he will lay down. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, if you know his description, كان ربعة من القوم صلى الله عليه وسلم. He was kind of a medium built, صلى الله عليه وسلم. So I'm pretty tall. I'm kind of chunky as well. So I'm heavy. I'm about 230 pounds. The Prophet ﷺ is not going to be as heavy as I am. Right? Let's even assume the Prophet ﷺ was 200 pounds. Let's assume. Right? How much can a camel, especially in the Arabian Peninsula, because there's different kind of camels, how much do you guys think a camel can hold? How much weight? Let me hear some guesses.
400?
500 pounds? You're going up? More than 500.
1,000?
Almost. 900, between 800 to 900 pounds. The Prophet ﷺ, like I said, let's even assume that he's really heavy at the time, and he was 200 pounds, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So the camel should be able to hold 4 or 4.5 of him, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But when he received the revelation, he gets so heavy that the camel is not able to hold him. So we talk about 5, 6, we don't know how many times heavier he was, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he received the revelation. So it makes you have to think. إِنَّا سَنُلْقِي عَلَيْكَ قَوْلًا ثَقِيلًا. That we will reveal some heavy words to you. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Muzammil. It's physically heavy, right? Mentally heavy. It is difficult to take for those who have desires and hawa. But yes, it's difficult and heavy in every aspect and every way, subhanAllah. Right? That not only will be heavy for you to receive, and heavy for people to accept, and heavy for people to practice, but literally when you get it, it's very heavy. And that is one of the reasons why he will sweat so much, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Right? Like if you are walking, you might like have a little slight sweating. But if you're like carrying some heavy bags, like let's say you're carrying like 70 pounds on each hand, if you're able to carry that, you will sweat really fast, right? And you will sweat profusely. That's why like if you do like some heavy lifting, you will sweat more and faster. So this is perhaps one of the reasons why the Prophet ﷺ will sweat so much. But not only that, but the stress that you will go through, that he went through, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, receiving the revelation. And the concentration, I don't know about you, but for example, if I'm sitting down even taking a test, if I'm really concentrating, I start to sweat. And if I'm already sweating, I'll even sweat more. So all of these compiled together, put together, will probably be the reason why the Prophet sweat so much. كانت تصيبه البرحاء صلى الله عليه وسلم. That he will kind of feel kind of feverish صلى الله عليه وسلم. The temperature will rise. Now imagine the heaviness of it physically, of just the whole sense of receiving words from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now how great that is. Think of that for a second. That out of all these human beings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is choosing one person to receive his words directly. Allahu Akbar. What kind of feeling would you have if you're that person? Right? You just be at awe. Like we look at the Qur'an and there's just all this i'jaz, this in it, all this miraculousness in it, and we stand in awe in front of it. Imagine being there, experiencing the revelation firsthand. كان وجهه يتربض صلى الله عليه وسلم. His face will start to look very serious, very gloomy. There will be some kind of darkness, almost they kind of say that start to look ashy صلى الله عليه وسلم during the time when the revelation will come. He will concentrate. You know when somebody is thinking something super serious, like something happened and you need to figure out a way out, right? You will have that look in your face that everybody who will look at you like, what's going on, right? You know that face where somebody's super serious. The Prophet ﷺ will have that serious face that the companions will look at him from far away and know, oh, he's receiving revelation. And he's sweating and all of this, and we hear the buzzing of beasts. He's receiving revelation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. وكان ينكس رأسه صلى الله عليه وسلم وكان يغطي رأسه. So the Prophet ﷺ would lower his head. So if he's like sometimes the Prophet ﷺ will be with his companions and he will be discussing or talking or having fun or whatever it is, and all of a sudden Jibreel alayhi salam will come to him, and the Prophet ﷺ will look down and will whatever he has on him sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the burda or anything else, he will actually put it on top of him. Let me just try to unravel this real quick. So the Prophet ﷺ will put it on top of his head to kind of cover his head a little bit and look down as well. So he will be around the companions, all of a sudden when he receives revelation ﷺ, he will look down and he will cover his head like this. And he will be quiet ﷺ. In the beginning we know of course from the hadith and from the Qur'an that the Prophet ﷺ, in the very few times he used to receive the Qur'an from Jibreel, he will start to repeat with Jibreel alayhi salam because he was afraid that he might forget it. He doesn't know what's going on, especially in the very beginning, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him, it's okay, calm down, we will preserve it, you don't have to worry about it, right? So don't repeat, just be quiet and listen. We will put it into your heart, we will engrave it there, you don't have to worry about it. So the Prophet ﷺ, out of reverence of course for his words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, will look down and will cover his face, his ras, his head, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and the companions will recognize that, and of course they will start to be quiet, or some of them will even leave and kind of give space to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam until revelation is done. So for example, one of the companions who asked Umar radiallahu anhu about how the Prophet sallallahu received revelation. One time he was walking by in front of the tent of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Umar was standing guard, and he said, "Ya, listen, didn't you ask me one time to know how the Prophet ﷺ received revelation?" He said, yes. He said, would you like to see him? He's receiving revelation right now. Imagine that, subhanAllah. And he said, yes, of course. And so he told him to come to the tent, and he moved the door of the tent to kind of let him look. And he looked at the Prophet ﷺ, and he described some of those things that the Prophet ﷺ was laying down, that he had covered his face, and he وَكَانَ رَأْسُهُ وَجْهُهُ يَغُطْ. And he was looking very serious, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his color would change and all of that. And of course, we talked about the repetition of the verses. And then the last description that man mentioned, وَكَانَ لَهُ غَطِيطٌ كَغَطِيطِ الْبَكْرِ. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam will have this guttural sound like the sound of a baby cow. Now, it comes to one of the reasons earlier we said that we have to understand the history, so that when people try to attack Islam, we know the real deal. So you have people who will, like Orientalists, who will come and say that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad used to have epilepsy, and he used to have seizures, and tongue will be sticking out, foaming at the mouth, and he will make this weird sounds. This is how they would describe our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he received revelation. Now, by the way, any medical professionals in the house? Anybody in the medical field? Nobody? Nursing, nothing? Okay, no worries, inshallah. Perhaps some of you are well-read, inshallah, in the area, so you can back me up on this. Now, have you ever, okay, if you're not in the medical field, how many of you have seen somebody have a seizure in front of you? Well, mashallah, but almost a third of the room. Okay, so now when somebody has a seizure, are they able to control themselves? No control, right? They fall out and start to shake violently. What do we have to do? Usually you have to hold them down so they don't bang their head on the floor and all of that and injure themselves, right? You have to stick your hand in their mouth and make sure that their tongue does not get swallowed and they choke, right? You put it on the side. There are certain procedures you do, right? And you try to get them to come to consciousness and talk to them. Hey, what's your name? What day is it? All of this type of stuff, right? Does that fit this description? The Prophet ﷺ will move, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He will cover his head, he will do this, he will look down. He's in control of his body, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Another thing, an epileptic person, how many of you have held the person down when they're having seizure? How does it feel, the body? Cold, right? It feels violently shaken, it's cold. The Prophet ﷺ gets so hot that he feels like he has a fever, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's sweating, right? So this is completely different from how a person who's epileptic would look like, right? So this is completely farce. It's completely fabricated. And now the last part. They said that he would make sounds. Of course he would not sting his tongue out, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would not foam at the mouth. This is absolutely craziness. But the guttural sounds, because they used to say that he used to make sounds like camels and all this, and they took it as a way of kind of demeaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
What kind of sound?
Guttural sounds. Have you ever heard like baby cows like making sounds like this? It's kind of similar to that. But keep in mind, who is the person describing the Prophet ﷺ as having those guttural sounds? It's a Sahabi, companion of the Prophet ﷺ. He loved the Prophet ﷺ. So when he's describing him from that point of view of love. He's not demeaning the Prophet ﷺ. So we have to understand and put things into perspective. When the Arab will describe things, they will describe things based on something they're familiar with, right? So for example, nowadays nobody here will describe somebody through describing a camel, because we're not that familiar with camels, right? We'll probably use something we're familiar with, phones, computers, something like technology or something like that, right? For the Arab, they knew camels. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even talks about them so often in the Qur'an. That's how they would describe a lot of things. And that man was a Bedouin. He did not live in Medina. That's why when he had the opportunity to see that, Umar would tell him, come look. Because you don't get to see this often. You're not around this that often. Right? Another thing is that for the Arab, camels were absolutely the prettiest thing you can ever look at. Right? I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. Like, they actually have, until this day, they have beauty pageants for camels.
Wow.
Wallahi, I'm not even kidding. They have beauty pageants. You know how over here they have it for dogs, for cats. They even have it for horses sometimes. Back there, we don't care about none of that. That camel dog, right? It's like the best thing ever. Something probably you haven't even paid attention to. One of the ways we actually say somebody, whether a man or woman, is beautiful or pretty. What's the word for it in Arabic? Jameel or Jamila. The root word is Jamal, which is a camel. I'm dead serious. But specifically, the Arab were very precise. When you say somebody is Jameel, that means that person is beautiful specifically because of their nose. If somebody is Hasan, they're beautiful, but especially because of their eyes. If somebody is Zayn, they're beautiful, but especially because of their akhlaq. So the Arab were very descriptive. So the camels, the best thing about a camel for the Arab, don't ask me why. I've lost my heritage when it comes to that. Their snouts. Like when they have a beauty pageant for camels, the number one thing they get judged on is their snouts. All of that, all slobber, that's pretty. Don't ask me why and how. But for them, they're like, oh my God, this is the prettiest thing ever. Right? So it's to the point where I was reading even in National Geographic, so I think back in 2002 or something like that, a Qatari man from Qatar, his camel won first place that year in the camel's beauty pageant. Somebody came and offered him $1 million and he refused to buy that camel. He was like, it's priceless. One from the family. Okay, let him go. So now keep all that in mind when you hear the Sahabi describing the Prophet ﷺ that he sounds like a baby camel. It's almost like saying he sounded so cute. Wallahi, that's how the description comes out, right? But of course, for somebody who have no relation to camels those big beasts who just spit on you and bite, and just for us, it's not a pretty image. But for them, it's like it's a love thing. Like, oh, he had this little girl that sounded like a little baby cow, or baby camel. That's the kind of description that the Sahabi was given. So it's important for us to know why we have those things mentioned in the hadith. What does it mean? Why was it said? So that way we're able to understand and have correct understanding of what's being said, and correct observation or perception of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. So now this is the actual experience of how the Qur'an would come down, different ways it would come down, and the experiences of the Prophet ﷺ, the experiences of the Sahaba, and of course after that, don't forget that they're getting answers for questions that just asked. So keep also that in mind. So not only the physical manifestations of feelings, but even just their mentality, their emotions and feelings of receiving answers that يسألونك ماذا ينفقون. They ask you what should they spend out of. قل العفو. Tell them to spend from whatever they have in access. Right? يسألونك عن الأهلة. قل هي مواقيت للناس والحج. They ask you about the crescent moons. Tell them. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is answering right there. That it is for them so they can use to compute the months and the days and the times for Hajj. Yes.
There is a transformation by a sound, or is a silent mode? How?
Very good. So the brother is asking, like, does he hear the actual words from Jibreel alayhi salam? So the scholars have differed on that. So they say that the ringing of bells is in the beginning, and little by little the Prophet ﷺ will start to hear the words of Jibreel alayhi salam reciting the actual words. And then it will be, that's it, in his heart, and when everything goes, all of those signs are lifted, and he comes to his normal way, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he will say, whoever are the writers, let them come and actually write this ayat, as we will describe inshallah in a minute. But others will say that no, he will hear the ringing of bells, but when it is over, the Prophet ﷺ will just have those words coming out, right? But the majority say because of the beginning, remember there's tardeed, the Prophet ﷺ used to repeat, so he must have heard some words. So the majority of scholars will actually lean toward that, which makes more sense actually, that the Prophet ﷺ will actually hear words. After he heard the loud ringing of bells and the Sahaba are hearing the bees, that will subside little by little, and then the Prophet ﷺ will start to hear the words of Jibreel alayhi salam. And then once he's done, the heaviness goes away, the heat will go away, he will stop sweating, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he will look up, he will uncover his head, and then he will start reciting the Qur'an. So jazakallah khair for the question, I forgot to cover that one. Now, let's talk about the preservation of the Qur'an. Now we know how the Qur'an was revealed. 23, and I was talking about the questions, one thing I forgot to mention, sorry. So that all these questions that the Sahaba used to have, the Prophet ﷺ would answer. Times when the Prophet ﷺ was stuck and doesn't know what to do, right? Or how to go about some things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send some revelation, right? Some challenge from the disbelievers, whether they're from Mecca or the Jews or the Christians, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer some questions. I just wanted to point out something really quick. When you have that relationship with the Qur'an, you will begin to notice that all these questions, يَسْأَلُونَكَ قُلْ يَسْأَلُونَكَ قُلْ, they ask you, say, they ask you and tell them, they'll ask you, tell them. 17 times in the Qur'an. There's only one time where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that they've asked you, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not command the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say قُلْ. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. When my servants ask you about me, I am near. SubhanAllah, look at the beauty. Anytime they ask you about something, give them, here's the answer. Oh, Muhammad, tell them the answer. But when it comes to when we ask about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, where is Allah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even moved the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from between us and him. This is direct from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to me and you. فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Right? Even the fa, if you study Arabic, it shows immediacy. This is really near. I'm right next to you. Right? So the revelation of the Qur'an, we have to live it where the Qur'an is being revealed to you and I right now. When we recite the Qur'an, is being revealed, yes, for me. Muhammad, me, I'm receiving this from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, by the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by way of Jibreel, through this, all these scholars that have sent it down until it came to me. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is revealing this Qur'an for me, just as He is revealing it to you. So I just wanted to point out this beauty, subhanAllah, that we have in the Qur'an. Now when it comes to gathering of the Qur'an, after all this revelation, 23 years of revelation of the Qur'an, why did it take so long? Why not just a book like the Torah, like the Injil, like the Zabur, like the Suhuf of Musa, like the Suhuf of Ibrahim, like the Suhuf of Shith alayhi salam, all these books of revelation, they came down as pieces, here, done. But the Qur'an did not come that way. It came through all this period of time. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned one of the strongest reasons in the Qur'an, لِنُثَبِّتَ بِهِ فُؤَادَكَ. So we can strengthen your heart. So we can give you that moral and emotional support. Imagine that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cared about how His Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam felt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have revealed the entire Qur'an in one book. Here, this is the guidance. You don't need anything else. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had in consideration that this Prophet will have some times where there's moments of weakness. There are moments where he needs that support, that push. So the Qur'an has been spaced out to give him that support. And we have to seek the same kind of support from the Qur'an when we recite it nowadays. That I seek guidance from the Qur'an. I seek strength from the Qur'an. I seek counsel from the Qur'an. I seek comfort from the Qur'an. And everything that I need, I will be able to find it of the Qur'an, in the Qur'an. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to open our hearts with the Qur'an. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to really absorb the Qur'an in our hearts.
I just want to, can I comment something? So, and also another reason why it took a while is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mandated that faith, al-Iman, can sometimes be thrown in somebody's heart in a split second. The Prophet ﷺ said in hadith that preempt very tight fitnas, very strong fitnas by acting good deeds, because there are going to be some tests where somebody in the morning is a believer and by the night time they're a disbeliever. So when it comes to Iman, it can be thrown in somebody's heart or taken away from somebody's heart. But when it comes to knowledge, ilm, it has to take time to build. That is so that we can appreciate the scholars and the people that teach us, because they spend time.
Very, very good point. So I just repeated so people in the back of the probably the sisters as well can hear. So what's the name, by the way? Name?
Muhammad.
Muhammad.
I don't know why, but I like the name now. So mashallah, Brother Mohammed was saying one of the other reasons, just to kind of summarize as well, is he's saying that Iman can come and go in moments, right? But ilm and knowledge, it takes time for it to build up. Like even if you look at the Prophet ﷺ, and I will add this to something, that the Prophet ﷺ was being primed to receive this knowledge, right? Knowledge, it doesn't even only just take time, but the person has to be primed and prepared to be able to receive knowledge, right? And it takes time for that knowledge to not only go in, but to really hold roots and stay in there. So yes, it does take time for us to grow. There's also that wisdom that our scholars said, that there's that need for graduality, right? That needs to be gradual. Like Aisha radiallahu anha said that if the Qur'an came down, this is halal from the beginning, nobody would have came into Islam, right? People have to be kind of eased into it. So there's a lot of wisdoms, subhanAllah, in the way that the Qur'an was revealed. Yes.
Also, it was like an answering to all the situations.
Yes. So it covers all these aspects, subhanAllah. There's infinite wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So, Brother Mohammed, how about the night of power, where we understand that the Quran was revealed in Laylat al-Qadr? Can you explain to us the difference?
Very good. So the revelation as far as relates to Laylat al-Qadr and the 23 years. So it's a very good question. I have no idea how I skipped that part.
I'm sorry.
No, this is good. I'm glad you brought it up. So yes, I recited in Salat al-Maghrib, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةِ الْقَدْرِ. We have revealed it, the Quran, in Laylat al-Qadr. And the other surah also in أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةٍ مُبَارَكَةٍ, that we have revealed it in a blessed night. So when you understand the Arabic and the siyagha of the Quran, like the way that the words are used in the Arabic language, in the descriptions, like especially in the Quran, is like I said, Arabic is very descriptive.
Specific. It's a very
Descriptive.
specific language.
So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about two different events. إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ فِي لَيْلَةٍ مُبَارَكَةٍ, according to the Mufassirin, that we have revealed it in that blessed night. We're talking about Ghar Hira, that very first night when we began the revelation of the Quran. We have sent it down, began that revelation in two different aspects. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent it down to Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, right? Which is the preserved tablet, as it's translated to English. Where from Jibreel alayhi salam, he was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take certain verses down to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So there is two steps to that revelation. The entire of the Quran came down from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and put into Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet. And from there, Jibreel alayhi salam take it piece by piece to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So there's two different levels of revelation. And also, that very first night is also held into as kind of revealed in a sense where that's the beginning of the revelation, is Laylatul Qadr. And then of course it's successively for 23 years until we have the entirety of the Quran. Yes.
Just you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the word used in Arabic, because a lot of people here don't speak Arabic, أنزلناه is different than نزلناه. Anzal usually refers to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, to a specific point of like a specific moment.
Right.
But nazzalnahu means to gradually reveal it.
Yes, very good. So yeah, that's what I'm kind of alluded to by saying siyagha. So if you studied Arabic morphology and like a sort of Arabic, and you understand that different verbs, like the brother shared by now, is that some verbs will be on used in a way to signify its immediacy, right? It's easy, it's done once, done. Whereas another form will be sighatul mubalagha, for example, will have that shadda, that doubling of the letter to kind of indicate that it's been going on and on and on and on and on, right? Or at least more than once. So all this will kind of give us an idea and understanding of how many things or how those things actually happen. So let's move on with the preservation. The Qur'an was preserved, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran and promised in the Quran, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Right? We are the ones who have revealed this Quran, this remembrance, and it is us who will protect it or preserve it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will preserve it. But just like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about how He created the heavens and the earth, and how many days it took to create each one, and He went and did this with the earth and this with the sky. But there are physical manifestations where we know there are laws of physics that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put. That's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the creation, right? So there are ways Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed for that preservation to happen. So number one, and it's the first firewall, if you will, is memorization, right? It's in the sudur before it's in the sutur. That's right, in the hearts before it's on lines on paper. So of course our Prophet ﷺ memorized the Quran as it was come to him, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised him. And the companions have memorized it from the Prophet ﷺ, who have taught it to others who have memorized it, and so on and so on and so on until our day. Alhamdulillah, we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who memorize the entire Quran. If not the entire Quran, then at least we memorize some part of it. Right? It's the most memorized book ever in human history. Right? And this is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised that He will preserve it. Another way of preserving the Quran is the writing. But we have to understand this. I don't have the Mus'haf with me, but if you look at the Mus'haf from Medina, right, that green covered Mus'haf from Medina print, if you look in the back, and other Masahif from other printers as well, if you look in the back, you actually find a page that talk about the committee that was there to actually oversee the printing of this Mus'haf, right? And we'll talk about later, inshallah, in more detail. But there are names of scholars who have excelled in the qira'at of the Quran. And they will actually be sent the draft of the writing of the Quran. And they will check the writing by their memory and not vice versa. Most of us who try to memorize the Quran, what do? We hold the Mus'haf, we read. Okay, no, I'm saying it wrong. Yeah, I'm saying it wrong. Okay, all right. We check our memorization by the book. But once you really excel, this was not actually the source. It has been and it still is in those who really apply it in the traditional way, where they actually make sure that the book is written correctly based on people's memorization. Memorization was that strong at the time, especially back. SubhanAllah, Allah, you see the wisdom of Allah and how He chose the time, the language, the people, the circumstances, everything about what happened around, even everything that happened in the world stage around the advent of Islam shows the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the preservation of Islam as we see it nowadays. Right? You have to be at awe of all of this. The Arab at the time, most of them did not know how to read and write. The whole language is preserved with oral language. It's spoken. Nothing is written really much. And they used to memorize everything. Where a person can come and give a speech for like 5, 10, 15 minutes straight. And half of the people who were sitting there, they'll memorize every single word. Right? And they will go out and they will relay that. And how do we know that? For example, if you look at just one issue, the mu'allaqat, literally means the hung, right? Because it's poetry that was considered the epitome of linguistics in Arabic at the time, that they will write it and then they will post it on the Kaaba. Like that's it. This is the top, right? So the mu'allaqat are long. Like now people will spend like weeks to memorize each one, right? Some of them are kind of very long, some of them not as long. But the shortest one will be a few pages long. Some of them will extend on for like 7, 8, 9 pages, a poem. And sometimes it's like on the spot, off the cuff. And the people who are standing around listening to the guy say it for the first time, many of them memorize the entire thing. Hearing it once, imagine, like let's say now let's just use a crazy example. Imagine Trump, our president, comes up and he gives a talk, right? And he rambles on and on and on, right? Imagine if your memory is strong enough that you remember exactly every single word and every movement he did, and like half of the people have that memory, and we just go out and tell people about it. We don't need media, we don't need nothing, right? And every single one who told the story actually relayed the words exact, right? We're talking about that kind of memory. SubhanAllah, it's very amazing, right?
It's like cloning.
Huh?
It's like cloning.
Yes. I mean, it's SubhanAllah, it's very, nowadays I guess we describe it as photographic memory, but it's not photographic because it's not even by sight, it's listening. So SubhanAllah, Allah gave him that ability. So the companions had that. But on top of that, the writing was important, right? So the Prophet ﷺ used to commission kuttab, scribes of the wahi. So in Mecca, the Prophet ﷺ had a few of the Sahaba who knew how to read and write, to write the Qur'an when it was revealed. Like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Khalid ibn Sa'id ibn al-As, Al-Arqam ibn Abi al-Arqam, and others, but those are the main ones in Mecca, right? For example, remember that famous story of the Islam of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu arda, right? Although there's issues of the authenticity, but it's believable. So he came to see his sister and if she accepted Islam. And they were inside of her house, her and her husband, Sa'id ibn Zayd radiallahu anhu arda. And they were sitting with Khabbab ibn al-Arat radiallahu anhu arda, with a piece of leather with Surah Taha, the beginning of Surah Taha on it, and he was teaching them, right? So somebody one of these used to go and read and write in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then read it back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And he'll say, okay, go teach it to the others. Everything was secretive, don't forget. So they will go and hide in houses and all this. The Prophet ﷺ received this revelation, let me teach it to you, right? Or if you're able to read, go ahead, here you go. In Medina, of course, more people came into Islam, more people were busy with life, so they need to have more scribes, right? So now that's when you have Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, radiallahu anhu arda, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Zayd ibn Thabit, especially those two names are very famous for that. Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and Abdullah ibn Abi Sarh. Now, notice one thing, that especially the ones in Medina, with the exception of Abu Ayyub radiallahu anhu arda, all the rest of them were youngsters. We're talking about like under 21 years old, right? The youth were there from the very beginning with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Zayd ibn Thabit, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina, he was only 10 years old. So when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, how old was he? How old was he? Huh? 16? No, he was 10 when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina.
23.
He was 20, right? 21. Because the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina for about 10 and a few months, right? So let's say 20. He was very young. But he was one of the writers of the Wahi, of the Qur'an. throughout that time. Not only that, but just kind of really quickly, just to show you how amazing the Prophet ﷺ is and how amazing his companions are. When Zayd ibn Thabit, when the Prophet ﷺ came, he relates this story, in Mission, I believe it's in Nasa'i, that he said to the Prophet ﷺ when he came to Medina, that the elders in my family, in my clan, were proud of me. And when the Prophet ﷺ came to visit them, they kind of pushed me forward and they said, Ya Rasulullah, we have this young man who memorized every Qur'an that have been revealed to you so far. Right? And we're showing off this kid. Our memory, he's really into it. He memorized every surah you told us about so far. So the Prophet ﷺ was not only impressed by Zayd ibn Thabit, but he wanted to encourage him further. So he spoke to him a little bit and he told him, I want you to learn the book and the language of the Jews. Zayd ibn Thabit at 10 years old, he went and he, according to him, he said he learned the entire Torah, memorized it, understood it, know how to read it and write it in 15 days. 15 days. Right? You're talking about a child who was able to memorize it, totally new language. And not only memorize it, I can say I don't understand. No, he was able to read it, write it, and understand the grammar. Where he would translate for the Prophet ﷺ. Right? When you have that kind of himmah, that kind of will, and you have somebody like the Prophet ﷺ to encourage you and really have that ihtiwa, to kind of, put you under their wing, that's how you're going to grow. And that's how we're supposed to really deal with our youth, right? We see that strength and we make sure that we strengthen them, right? That we put them up. Other kutab that came after Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, after the Treaty of al-Hudaybiyah, Abu Sufyan was, until that time, was not a believer. And he became Muslim at Fath Makkah, right? So after that time of al-Hudaybiyah, more people start becoming kutab for the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Sufyan is one of them. His son Muawiyah radiallahu anhu was one of them. And also his uncle Al-Abbas radiallahu anhu, all of them started to actually write for the Prophet ﷺ. Because those were the people who were kind of the writers, right? They were good in writing and all that, and they were more often around the Prophet ﷺ. So whoever was around at the time who was able to write will write it in front of the Prophet ﷺ. But these and a few more individuals were commissioned by the Prophet ﷺ that you write your relation, especially if you're around. If you're not, you'll be caught. Right? So now, what did they write on? They didn't have paper. The only place in the world at the time that had makeshift paper is China. They had paper that doesn't look like our paper nowadays. It was really rough and rugged, right? And it was done in scrolls or just pieces, right? So they didn't have paper like we have it nowadays. What did they write on? Can you guys tell what this is?
Yeah, the shoulder bone of camel.
Oh, mashallah. How many camels have you eaten? You recognize it right away. That's the shoulder I was eating it last night. Shoulder blade, mashallah. So this is a shoulder blade of a camel. It's wide enough where they're able to actually write on it. I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of sideways where you have Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim this way, right?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Fatiha. Right? And there's the signature in the very end over here. So they used to write.
This is a real writing of that time.
No, it's not from that time, but this is kind of a replica. It's something a little. It's old. This is very old as well, but not from the time of the Sahaba. Yeah. So people didn't have material that was ready, right? It's whatever was around you, grab that. If it's a piece of bone, grab it. If it's other pieces, like sometimes like this, stone, right? So it's pieces of flat stones that's usually not too heavy because you don't want to grab boulders and write on it. So they'll find something that's kind of flat and small, and they'll try. Imagine the Prophet ﷺ receiving revelation, you have to bring this piece and right? It's difficult, but they had to do what they had to do, right? They will write on pieces of leather, pieces of stone, pieces of big pieces of bone. Also of the jarid of the nakhl. You know how like in the palm trees, we're familiar with palm trees, alhamdulillah. You know how like the stem of that leaf is kind of wide, right? So they used to take off the kind of the cover, if you will, to kind of get that dark brown piece off, and there's a lighter piece inside. So they used to write on it. It's easier than, it's softer than rock, so it was easier to write on that. So they used to write it on different pieces, leather, stone, whatever it is that they're able to find around them, right? So it was just scattered all over the place. And there's different compilers, different scribes, some different kutab. So different, okay, this surah is here with this person and that person, but they don't have this surah. That surah actually, this person and that person and this person have it, and so on, right? It's spread all over the place. And it's difficult to compile, in one place. You have some companions who will actually put more effort and try to compile all in one place. Like Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu wa ardah, well, actually, when he sees the Prophet ﷺ reviews with Jibreel alayhi salam the Qur'an in Ramadan, he will come and sit with him and review the entire thing as well, right? To make sure that he has the entire thing. Other Sahaba like Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Ali radiallahu anhu, other Sahaba, they will have the entire thing compiled toward the end of the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or if not the entire thing, the majority of it, right? So they will try to write it. Some of them wrote it in the order the Prophet ﷺ said to put it in. So the Prophet ﷺ, when he received revelation, he will call the kutab and he will tell them to write it. And then after they finish, he say, add this to the surah that start with that, right after the ayah that says this. And he will tell them exactly where to put it, right? Other companions like Ali radiallahu anhu ardah and also Abdullah ibn Mas'ud have compiled the Qur'an in chronological order. So based on the order of revelation and not the order the Prophet ﷺ have put this for academic purposes, right? They wanted to know and keep in memory like this surah came down first and then this and then this and then this and then this and so on, right? So that will help us knowing which surah came down first, yes.
Any of those actually survive?
The actual writings that they had, no.
No,
But we know the order and everything, yes, it's preserved.
I mean, the other one, like, other one is still the same thing.
Yeah, we know the order. We don't have his own handwriting, but we know what order he put it in. Yeah, for example, he started with Al-Baqarah instead of Al-Imran, he put in Nisa. Right? So we actually know the order. Like if you go and study the Ulum al-Quran, you will see that Abdullah ibn Mas'ud wrote his Mus'haf with this surah and this surah, and they will actually give you the list. Ali radiallahu anhu wa ardah put it in chronological order, and he puts surah Iqra, and then Mudaththir, then Muzammil, then, and so on. And this Sahabi, and so on. So then all those are preserved, alhamdulillah, yes.
Do we have any original copy of from the leather or the bone or something?
We'll come to that inshallah.
Oh, okay.
I'm coming to that, yes. So, I know we don't have that much time, so we'll try to speed through it inshallah. So, there's another phase of preservation. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ, just to remind you, those scribes, those kutab used to write down the ayat, and then they will read it back to the Prophet ﷺ and make sure that they have written it correctly. And there's more than one at a time, right? So the entire Qur'an has been written in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Many companions used to review every year with the Prophet ﷺ, right? So it's preserved, it's in writing, but we don't have it in a book form. It's in different pieces. Some companions have this, all these pieces, imagine, compiled in a corner. Some of them have only pieces of it and so on. So, but everyone at the time memorized it. There are a lot of companions who memorized the Quran. For example, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu ardah was a young man, by the way, and he said that there was a group in Medina called Al-Qurra, the reciters, right? Al-Qurra, the plural of Qari. 70 youth under 21 years old. They used to come and learn from the Prophet ﷺ, and then they will spread out in Medina to teach the people the Quran, right? So this is just a group of youth that got together and said, we're going to take it upon ourselves to spread, make sure we teach everybody the Quran. We're going to go learn directly from the Prophet ﷺ, and then we're going to go teach it to everybody in our areas, in our neighborhoods, right? So this is just one example. Of course, all the major companions have memorized the entire Quran as well, but before the passing of the Prophet ﷺ. But years later, after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu passed away, I'm sorry, not actually before. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa, during the first 2 years after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So within about 10 months or so, we all know that there have been a lot of wars, right? Hurub al-Ridda, right? Of the war of the apostates. And many people were dying in battles, right? Especially there's a huge battle of Al-Yamama where they're fighting against Musaylim al-Kadhab, Musaylim the liar. And it's mentioned that 50 of the Qur'an, of the famous reciters of the Sahaba have been martyred during that battle. So Umar ibn Khattab was seeing all these battles and all these companions passing away, and that they are dying by the dozens in each battle. So he was afraid that maybe we're going to lose everybody who memorized the Qur'an eventually. So we need to have a different kind of firewall, if you will, another way of preserving the Qur'an just in case. So he came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu arda and said that we should write everything down in kind of, now we have enough pieces of leather and all that, we bound it almost like in a book. Let's put it together in one place where it's intact, right? Instead of stone and wood and this and that and that. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu arda first was like, I can't do something that the Prophet ﷺ did not do. I just can't do it, right? But Umar radiallahu anhu arda kept at it for days. This is a good thing. We need to do it. We need to do it. And he was given different arguments until Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu arda said that my heart was open. I just felt comfortable. You know what? This is the right thing to do. That we need to do it. It's been compiled in front of the Prophet ﷺ, so it's not an issue of something new. It's not a bid'ah in that sense. We just need to rewrite it in a way that looks neater, right? Something smaller, so you can actually hold it together. So you know what? Makes sense. So who did they commission? Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu arda. Zayd ibn Thabit, when he was told, he said, how do you want me to do something that Prophet did not do? SubhanAllah, look at the mentality. Even as a youngster, 21 years old at the time, thinking the exact same thing that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was thinking, right? And then they kept at it. They trying to, no, this is a good thing. And they give him different arguments until he said, you know what, it makes sense. I feel comfortable with it. But then he made a statement that's SubhanAllah amazing. He said, if Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu arda have commissioned me to move the mountain of Uhud from this side to the other side of Medina, it would have been easier than this. Right? Something heavy. This is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's a great amana in it. Right? So it's difficult. This is a person who memorized the entire Qur'an. He has the entire Qur'an written in front of him. He was the special writer of the Prophet ﷺ of the Qur'an. He's written the entire Qur'an in front of the Prophet ﷺ. And it's still, when he was told, we need you to write it in one place, he felt that it was a heavy burden. It's a heavy amana, right? Most of us nowadays, how do we feel? I write a Quran, oh man, I got this, right? Easy. We don't think about the gravity of it, right? But subhanAllah, that understanding that they had of the Quran is amazing. So Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu arda start to compile, or write down the Quran. So there's a methodology, really quick. Again, like we said, it's all has been written. He can just rewrite whatever he had and written with the Prophet ﷺ and say, here it is. But no, there have to be some ethics, right? There have to be a way that is done where no one can come and question the integrity of the writing. So he put some standards. And subhanAllah, this way of thinking went in all the Islamic studies and actually is the reason why we have the scientific method nowadays. It came from Islamic history and Islamic studies that actually went into how Muslims used to study science and physics and everything else, and they put the same standards to those sciences, which was then given to the rest of the world. So that ethical issues that we have in the study of science came from our study of the Qur'an and the Hadith and Islamic sciences. So what was the kind of the rule that he had? He actually put a statement in Medina that everyone who has written Qur'an in front of the Prophet ﷺ, I want you to bring that piece of writing with 2 witnesses that saw you write it in front of the Prophet ﷺ. Otherwise, I'm not accepting it. So it took weeks because Medina is big and people, have to. It's not like we make a big announcement and everybody heard it. Until everybody hears about it and dig it out and all that and bring the witnesses, we all have free time, all that. It took time. But people will come in with all kind of pieces of leather and bone and this and that when saying, I wrote this in front of God. I said, your witnesses, this person and this person. They're legit, we're going to write it. And of course, he already had it. But to show that this is an agreement of all the companions that lived around the Prophet ﷺ, that this is actually the Qur'an as it was revealed. Right? So no one can doubt it. No one can put issues like, we don't know, maybe you added this, maybe you changed this word, we don't know. Are you sure about this? No. Everything has been written in front of him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said this is the correct writing and correct pronunciation, and we have witnesses that saw this person actually do all of that. So this was the first phase. Later on, during the time of Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda, Sahabi Hudayf ibn al-Yaman radiallahu anhu wa arda, the secret keeper of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was out in Sham and in Iraq and fighting for the cause of Allah, spreading Islam, and then he noticed that people were making a lot of mistakes in the Qur'an, and they're arguing about it. A lot of them were people who were like, Arabic is not their first language. So when they're trying to read the Qur'an, as you will see, it has no vowels, it has no dots. So they were making mistakes, and when somebody corrects him, no, it's this, arguing and fighting, all kind of stuff. So he immediately left and came back to Medina. And went to Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda and said, you need to save the Muslims. What's going on? And he told him what he saw. So Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda commissioned a committee, right? And the committee comprising of those four, Zayd ibn Thabit, again radiallahu anhu wa arda. You can see the prominence of this companion. Abdullah ibn Zubayr, also a young companion of the Prophet ﷺ. Sa'id ibn al-As and Abdul Rahman ibn al-Harith. All of them are from Mecca except for Zayd ibn Thabit from Medina and Ansar. Right? The rest of them are all from Quraysh. So when Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda commissioned them, he said, I need you to take this mushaf that we've written at the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu wa arda. They compiled it. Zayd ibn Thabit written it on leather, and then they gave it to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu wa arda, kept it. If anybody had any questions, anybody had any doubts, come and check it out. When he passed away radiallahu anhu wa arda, Umar was the Khalifa and he kept it. When he died radiallahu anhu wa arda, his daughter Hafsa, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, kept it. So Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda sent someone to Hafsa radiallahu anhu wa ardaha to bring that copy. And he gave it to these four. And he said, I want you to write it down and unify the writing. The issue was, Arabic was not a written language. It was not standardized. As you will see, I will show you examples of that writing back then, inshallah. It was not standardized, and it looked all weird, and it's not like, nowadays, mashallah, like 2 weeks ago we had a calligrapher who came and is teaching people how to write, and it had measurements, and you have to write exactly that way, and you can't do this and that. Back then it was just, whatever, right? So there was no tasnam, none of this, letters look almost alike, all kind of issues. So I want you to standardize the spelling, unify the spelling, right? But if you disagree amongst yourself, then write it in the way of Quraysh. You have three of you from Quraysh, so if you three agree that it should be written that way because that's how Quraysh would have written it, write it that way. And that is what we call the Mus'haf of Uthman. That's what we call Al-Rasm al-Uthmani, the Uthmani script, because this is what Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda have commissioned. Right? Don't mix it with other Uthmans that will come, that we'll talk about later on, inshallah. So this is the companion Uthman radiallahu anhu wa arda. So in his time they wrote it and they made a few copies of it, and they said anybody who have a copy of the Qur'an that does not go with this spelling, burn it. And this is an issue where non-Muslims will come and say the Qur'an was written in different ways, they changed it, they this and that, and they burned the evidence and all that. No. It was not that different. The only issue is some people have made some misspellings, right? Some people have written it in a way that doesn't look proper according to how these companions agreed to it. So everything else, to cause no issues or confusion, burn it. We're going to keep one standard spelling from now on, so everybody can learn one way, and from there continue. And the qira'at still survive. They did not limit any of that. And subhanAllah, the way they have written it, they wrote one script that actually was able to hold all the different qira'at from the Prophet ﷺ into that one writing. Because of the issue of no dots back then, the issue of no harakat. If you don't understand what the qira'at is, I'm sorry we don't have enough time right now to go into it, but there's the qira'at, there's the ahruf of the Qur'an in different numbers, and that discussion is very lengthy, but I will encourage all of you to ask somebody who's knowledgeable in that regard, inshallah, to understand something about it.
That means there were vowels were put and inserted already.
No, there was no vowel. I'm about to show you examples right now. So I know it's actually time for Isha right now. So should we take a few more minutes and finish it, or should we still do Isha and then continue?
No, we should finish it. Let's finish it.
Probably another 10 minutes. 15 minutes.
Yeah, let's
It's
finish
okay?
Okay, Jazakallah. Right. We'll try to rush through the rest, inshallah. So, the writing back then, and this is just again to kind of give you, just see how you're going to feel about this, right? Especially if you haven't seen this before. Now, this is a copy of the Qur'an. It's very, very old. And what do you guys notice? Other than the fact that it's old and it's kind of fading out, and this red leather is wrinkly and all of that. This is, okay, just to show you. So this piece until here, this brown area, this is leather that's been put on top of like paper as well. So it's been kind of preserved on that. So it's kind of, yeah, pressured on the paper. So you see those, right? Can anybody read this? No vowels, no dots, no harakat, no none of that. Even the way that, can you guys see, I don't know, qaf, dal, yeah. Do you recognize any letter? There's something that looks like a wow. There's something that looks like a sin, right? It's very difficult to kind of tell, right?
Alif, lam, la, something like that.
Okay, so let's take another image. This is also another manuscript. Back, this is in Egypt in the museum. And look how big that thing is. This is the Qur'an, right? Imagine trying to hold that in Taraweeh and read it. Right? Imagine trying to hold that big book and trying to read the Qur'an from it. It's difficult because look how big the writing is. Right? This is according to the Kufi script that they used to write back then. Right? So this is actually within the 1st century of Islam. Right? So they kind of carbon dated and all of that to say that it was actually during the Umayyad time. Right? So this is, we're talking about 30 years after the Prophet passed away. Right? Between 30 to 50 years. That's as far as good as they can get it. Right? This is another picture. This is something I took a long time ago in Turkey. So, look at the writing. Again, it looks very different from what we have in the Mus'haf, right? It doesn't look like the Medina print. It doesn't look like the one printed in Karachi. Or the one printed anywhere. It doesn't look like anything we're familiar with, right? Very different. No dots, no vowels. It's very crude. And again, the letters, a lot of letters look different. Like, look like it's alien writing right now, right?
It's a Kufi.
This is a Kufi script. There are different Kufis, and according to the Sheikh that came, the calligrapher said 70. There are 70 styles of Kufi, so this is one of them. The other one was a totally different one, by the way. So this is a close-up. Can anybody read this?
Bismillah ar-Rahman.
Very good. MashaAllah. So yes, the very first line, this is Bismillah ar-Rahman. No dot. Not on the noon, not on the ba. Ar-Rahim. Qul. No dot on the qaf. A'udhu. Look at that zat. Right? If you've written that and that like that in your class, you probably would have been that. Right? Qul a'udhu. Bi Rabbil Nas. Malik. Look at the kaf here. Malik al-Nas. Ilahi al-Nas, and so on. This is Surah al-Nas. Right? Looks very, very different. Right? Looks very different. Let me see, actually, I might have. Here you go. Like that's Surah al-Nas, and that's Surah al-Nas as we see it nowadays. Look at the difference. Alright? So I'm gonna show you right now how it got from that to that, inshallah. But what about this? Can anybody read this? Surah al-Nas is a little easy. You can recognize some words. What about this one? Uh-huh. Where's what part? I don't see that part. ذات الرجع, no. Oh, والسماء was easy, huh? Okay. So, this is, that line over here was to indicate the end of the surah and the beginning of the surah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالسَّمَاءِ ذَاتِ الْبُرُوجِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْمَوْعُودِ وَشَاهِدٍ. This is shahid.
Yeah.
وَمَشْهُود. The dal of mashhud is here. Alright? Today that would not be accepted. Like, you can't just finish the end of half of the word here and the other word. You can't do that, right? So the standard wasn't there. What is this then?
Allah.
This is the surah before it. This is غير ممنون. غير ممنون, the last line. So what is this then? الصالحات لهم أجر
غير ممنون.
This is the end of what surah?
Teen.
No, انشقاق. Yes, end of انشقاق. So it's not the whole ayah, it's الصالحات لهم أجر غير ممنون, and then the beginning of Surah Al-Buruj. Right? It looks very different. Right? So how did it get to how we have it nowadays? Where in the world did we have all this harakat? How did the writing all of a sudden become all like smooth and easy to read and all of that? So, throughout time, people have tried to make sure that they make the writing easy for people to be able to read directly. Back then, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people would talk orally. The Prophet ﷺ would sit with the companions, repeat after me. and repeat the ayah, back and forth. And the Prophet ﷺ will say, whoever that من أراد أن يقرأ القرآن غضا طريا كما أنزل فليقرأه على ابن أم عبد. Whoever wants to read the Qur'an fresh as it was just revealed right now, let him read it the way that Ibn Mas'ud reads it, right? Ibn Umm Abd. And sometimes the Prophet ﷺ will say, اقرأ القرآن على أربع. Read the Qur'an from 4 people. And he will name 4 companions. Learn it from those 4. Right? Mu'adh ibn Jabal. Can you guys name the others?
Abdullah bin Mas'ud.
No, he didn't name him in this time, huh?
Ziyad bin Thabit.
No, not Abdullah bin Mas'ud, not this time.
Ziyad bin Thabit.
Zayd ibn Thabit? No, sorry, not this time. In this 4 he didn't mention Zayd ibn Thabit. So Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Ubay ibn Ka'b, Salim, Mawla Abi Hudayfa. Salim is a companion of the Prophet ﷺ who was an ex-slave owned by Hudayfa, Hudayfa ibn Rabi'a. This man was so knowledgeable of the Qur'an that Umar ibn Khattab, when he was about to pass away, he said, remember what the Umar, how he left the Khilafah? He left it between 6 people. You guys get together and find out who's the next Khalifa. Umar when he was sick, he said, if Salim, the ex-free slave of Hudayfa, if he was alive, I would have not even let it be a shura, I would have just picked him. Right? That's how great of a man was Salim radiallahu anhu. But how many of us have even heard of the name? And the Prophet ﷺ said, learn the Qur'an from him. He told the companions, you want to learn the Qur'an, go learn it from Salim. Right? He was that knowledgeable of the Qur'an. So now look at this. For the brevity of the time, I know it's taking too long. So can somebody read this? This is the go-to now. Where's Qul? Let's not Qul. Okay. So this is what? وَالصُّبُحِ إِذَا تَنَفَّسْ إِنَّهُ لَقَوْلُ رَسُولٍ كَرِيمٍ بِقُوَّةٍ عِنْدَ ذِي الْعَرْشِ مَكِينٍ مُطَاعٍ. Right? And it stops there. But now you notice there are red dots. So some of the scholars of linguistics, they were trying to figure out how can I show the reader where to give it a kasra, where to give it a fatha. So Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi rahimahullah, he said, I'm going to put red dots. I'll put one on top of the letter if it's fatha, it's a. I'll put it underneath for kasra, e. And I'll put it to the left of it if it's dhamma, u. Right? That's why, for example, the alif here, you have e, inna. And there's on top of the noon, na. And then to the left of ha, hu, innahu. Right? So this is the beginning of harakat. This is how they started. Right? But now imagine a whole page just filled with red dots all over the place. Right? Or if you don't have colors, it's the writing in black and the dots are in black. It's just confusing. Right? And then sometimes, okay, this dot, is it for this letter or for that letter? Okay, what's going on here? So it gets difficult. Right? So it needs to be refined further. And the writing as well. Like this one was a little clearer than the other ones, you know, if you have a trained eye. And it gets easier and easier as you have. But also to point out, this is a copy of the Qur'an that's about 500 years old, but this is written according to, and this, my brother over there, Daniel will love this. This is the Moroccan, Al-Maghribi script, right? The Moroccan script. If you look at it, this word right here is fariqa. The fa has a dot underneath. The qaf has a dot on top. Right? There are some subtle differences here and there. It's not exactly the same. And also the way you write noon, like it's not quite circular, it's this way and so on. So there are a few minor differences because different people develop different systems. Right? So it was not standardized right away. So the people in the far west, like in the Morocco area, they developed this kind of writing hundreds of years ago. Whereas the rest around, the Arabian Peninsula and Iraq and Sham and Egypt, they use the way that we are familiar with nowadays, right? So now this is something also a few hundred years ago, but you can see that the writing is more refined for us to be able to read, right? Now you have harakat, you have dots, you have all of that. This is Surah Al-Fatiha on the right side, and then Surah Al-Falaq on the left side, right? The writing is still kind of, the calligraphy a little hard to read, but now it's more closer to the standard that we have nowadays, right? And subhanAllah, the person who've commissioned for scholars to actually figure a way out is Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf al-Thaqafi, one of the biggest tyrants in Muslim history, right? A person that scholars will this close to cursing him. Like his guy have caused so many atrocities that people don't even want to mention his name. But subhanAllah, he's the one who said, you know what? This is a little thing. I need you guys, ulama, sit down. Nobody leave this room until, right? Like force them, like you need to get this done. SubhanAllah. So it got down to the way that we have it nowadays, and it got refined over hundreds of years of calligraphers until we have this man right here, that's the fadl, to write that piece that he's pointing to. That's the Khattab, the calligrapher, Uthman Taha, right? So that's why I said when you hear the Uthmani script or Uthmani rasm or writing, don't confuse it. This is a calligrapher who's still alive nowadays, originally from Syria, and he is the one who wrote the Mus'haf that me and you read most of the time, the Medina print. So this is actually him writing the Mus'haf. So none of this Masahif that you have anywhere have been printed like, by computer or type, ever. Every single one of them actually started by handwriting. So this Khattab and others will actually sit and write the Qur'an. So that image that we saw before that, this is handwriting, right? And as far as they didn't have print now. No one is allowed to print the Qur'an by using a typewriter. Or, you have to be handwritten. And this Sheikh, he is trained in Rasm al-Uthmani, in the Uthmani script, to make sure that we don't use the modern standards in writing and spelling. We use the same standards that Uthman and his committee that have commissioned have written. They keep it as the different how we write Arabic nowadays. Some standard and spellings are different. And he will actually sit down. This is him actually writing that surah down, right? And I will show you the process right now, inshallah. The ink, like we heard, you're like roughly max. You have to dip the ink, you have to dip again, and keep going like this. Until now, he writes this way, right? Passed down. This is like the authenticity that we have in Islam, that even understanding in the way that it comes in have to be preserved, right? Not only the understanding and the writing, but everything that comes with it. Everything. He became an expert in calligraphy. He said it took me 20 years to feel confident. Have to write it that big. So he was on the right side right here. And then he will take a smaller brush and put the harakat, right? And then from that, they'll actually take a big picture of what he wrote, minimize it. The one from Medina will have certain of lines, maybe bigger writing. Instead of 13 lines, it's like words are big. All copies, right? From even a different, and they actually copy all those big books that you see in the Bible. So, a few. Like one of how the other uh,